Hi everyone, and welcome to Module 5. This week we are talking about teamwork and leadership. As we cover teamwork and leadership, I want to make sure we understand we're doing so in the context of the development of diversity consciousness. When we think about the relationship between leaders and teams, it's important to remember that a true team takes time to develop. We often assemble a group of people and call them a team, but that group is likely to progress through some stages of development as a team. So one thing I want you to think about as we go through this module is the following question. At what stage do you think we're likely to experience effects of diversity? So let's dig into those stages a bit more and keep thinking about your answer to the question I just asked. At the first stage, forming, teams often experience unclear goals, have untested team roles, have yet to experience working together, and there's likely to be a combination of anxiety and excitement. The next stage is storming, and in this stage, individuals have kind of figured out their own individual roles, and because of that, there are probably multiple goals that the team is working toward. And because folks have started to figure out their own individual roles, there are likely some role conflicts within the team. It's during the storming phase that the team starts to develop processes for working together, and we're probably going to experience some personal conflicts, which relate to there being multiple goals. During the norming stage of a team process, that's when we start to see some shared goals being brought together. There are clear roles and division of roles within the team. Team members start to trust each other, and we start to see some norms develop within the team. And by norms, I'm talking about as a group, what are our expectations? What are normalized behaviors? And because we've started to develop team norms, we also start to hold each other accountable to those norms. And then the final stage is performing. And in the performing stage, teams start to experience shared success. Rather than being clearly defined, distinct roles, we start to see a blending of roles, and roles become interchangeable so that everyone can jump in and pitch in together. Trust is clearly and firmly established, and the group starts to take on much more of a we orientation. And it's in this stage that the group and the team is open to and willing to take risks. And it's once we've gotten to that stage of team development that we can get into what Butcher addresses when he covers the topic of synergy. And synergy is the concept where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And one way that this is expressed is mathematically with the idea that 1 plus 1 equals 3. That it's taking those separate pieces and combining them together in meaningful ways that gets us beyond what we would usually think of. Usually 1 plus 1 simply equals 2, but from a synergistic perspective, it's when we combine those disparate parts of those separate pieces of 1 and 1, and when we combine them together in a synergistic fashion, we get something that's so much more. And that's what we're really working towards in a team development atmosphere. So I wanted to think of a way to try to represent this idea of synergy beyond 1 plus 1 equals 3, because to me even that seems abstract and somewhat intangible. So I wanted to think about the parts of a bicycle. And we can look at this and see that there are parts of a bicycle, but simply pictured like this, they're nothing more than parts. And it's not until we put those parts together in a meaningful way, in a systematic fashion, that we have this synergy of a unit of a bicycle. With the concepts of team development and synergy in mind, I want to take a step back and make some connections to the barriers to diversity consciousness that we've covered previously in this course. And you can see that some of those barriers are also represented as obstacles to teamwork. And so we can think about barriers to diversity consciousness for ourselves as leaders, but we can also see that those barriers can be manifest as obstacles to teamwork within our organizations as well. And so as we think about teamwork and leadership, well, we need to talk about, well, what is leadership? And simply put, leadership is the process by which people inspire, influence, and empower others to achieve a common goal. And there are a lot of different perspectives on leadership. I'm going to share a couple in this video. So one perspective on leadership is that there are three key features of leadership. That there's a process orientation. This is where leadership reflects what the leader is doing rather than the leadership position. There's an interactive element in that leadership is all about relationships and other people. And then there's a situational element to leadership, that leadership cannot be determined without consideration of the context. And I like to make this point and share my perspective on leadership, is that we call a lot of people leaders. And oftentimes the people we call leaders are in some position of authority or supervise other people. And for me, leadership is not just about those things. And in fact, most of the leaders I've interacted with in my lifetime so far have not always been in positions of authority. And in fact, there have been plenty of examples where people in authority who are supposed to have been leaders have shown very little leadership whatsoever. And so as I think about what leaders do, one of the big things for me is that leaders support teams. Leaders lead by example. They coach. They encourage participative decision making. This means they involve the entire team in decision making. They make sure that team members are informed of what's going on from all different perspectives. And a leader shows concern and interacts with members of the team. So a leader doesn't just sit behind a desk, and a leader doesn't sit with the door closed making decisions. There's an author named John Maxwell who has written a lot about leadership. And I had a supervisor at one of the institutions I worked at that was a big John Maxwell fan. And so in fact, in my first week on the job, she shared with me a couple of books by John Maxwell, and I read them and I enjoyed them. And so I really like this quote because, again, it's not about power that a leader has or authority that a leader has, but a true leader makes the effort and enacts on empowering others. And then another perspective on leadership that I've always enjoyed is the Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. And I was introduced to this book and this perspective on leadership when I was an undergraduate student involved in student government. And the chancellor of the university I attended came to one of our leadership retreats. And here we go. Yes, we use the term leadership to talk about students engaged in campus activities and student organizations. But I digress. The chancellor came and talked to us and wanted to share his perspective on being a leader. And what he shared with us were 5 features of leadership that Kouzes and Posner found through their research. And those 5 things that they found, that leaders challenge the process, inspire a shared vision, enable others to act, model the way, and encourage the heart. So I want to share a little bit about these 5 things. In challenging the process, leaders venture out. Again, they don't sit behind their desk all the time and keep the door closed, making decisions. Leaders challenge what we do. They ask why. So when a leader comes into a new organization, or even not necessarily a new organization, just takes a critical look at the things that we do as an organization, the leader asks why. Why do we do things a certain way? Leaders adopt innovation early. They like to experiment and take risks. And they don't accept failure. Failure is certainly an opportunity to learn. And I always like the quote that the only failure in falling is not getting up. Leaders enable others to act. One of the reasons I like to talk about teamwork and leadership together in the same module is because of the first point on this slide. Leadership is a team effort. A true leader empowers team members, and empowerment is only possible through trust. Modeling the way is one of my favorite pieces from Kouzes and Posner. And another way to think about modeling the way is credibility. Doing what you said you're going to do. Leaders encourage the heart. And this is so important. It's important to celebrate victories and to celebrate milestones, big and small. But we have to be careful when we do these celebrations. So I had a department chair when I worked at another institution who was all about celebration, but he would make a big point to let us know that he spent his own money on the celebration or his own budget. And it really deflated the entire celebratory feel of what we were doing and got to where we forgot what we were even celebrating, and most of us would just get our piece of cake and leave the room. Where if he had not had done that, we would probably have stayed in the room and really celebrated whatever the milestone was. So I've got some true-false questions I want you to think about and answer for yourselves. A leader is the smartest person on the team. A leader has to be able to persuade people to do things they don't want to do. A leader needs to be able to treat everyone the same despite their differences. A leader should provide snacks for all meetings. So I want to make sure that we think about the skills of a diversity-conscious leader when it comes to teamwork and leadership. A leader has to be able to adapt and encourage adaptation within the team. A leader has to think and communicate inclusively. And a leader has to assess and monitor the team, both in terms of performance and also in terms of team development. And I want us to keep in mind that synergy is natural. Synergy is going to naturally occur when we bring people together and support them and empower them. Intergroup contact leads to good things, but we have to be mindful that it takes work. As we've covered in a previous module, there's some important strengths for diversity-conscious leaders. And finally, diversity-conscious leadership falls on you as the leader. It is incumbent upon you as the leader to recognize, understand, and adjust to diversity in all its forms. I might come from a cultural background that examines issues from a purely fact-based perspective, where other team members might consider more humanistic perspectives of issues and how decisions could impact people. This is just one example of how leaders need to be mindful of diversity.